Managing industries at sea has never been simple. Far from land, across multiple jurisdictions, and costly to enforce, the ocean is one of the hardest places in the world to manage. But new technology is allowing us to watch the ocean like never before. Still, innovation comes with trade offs. As artificial intelligence expands, questions are emerging about its environmental footprint, from water and energy use to the possibility of jobs being displaced. So, how do we balance these risks with the unprecedented potential of technology to improve ocean governance? This is Ocean Intelligence, a natural justice series exploring how data, AI, and science are reshaping the world of fisheries and agriculture. Welcome, Paul, to the Natural Justice Podcast, where we talk about the use of technology and AI in the ocean space. Today, specifically, we will be talking about Global Fishing Watch, the organization of which you are the co-founder and currently the Chief Innovation Officer. For listeners that are maybe less familiar with Global Fishing Watch, could you describe its mission and what is your role there? What do you do as Innovation Officer?
Thank you, Ava. It's a pleasure to meet you and talk to you today. I am the co-founder of Global Fishing Watch. We started the company 10 years ago. My background is software engineering and software development. So I built the technology that runs the platform. And now I lead the company as the Chief Innovation Officer, which means I oversee all of the technology and new innovation and data science, machine learning, AI work that we do.
Amazing. Super interesting. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting that Global Fishing Watch is, in a way, a tech organization. And in another way, you're also a not-for-profit and a really, I would say, significant NGO in the ocean space. So something I find, following the work that Global Fishing Watch does and in the communications, I regularly find that about 75% of the world's industrial fishing vessels are not publicly tracked. So in your opinion, why is that an issue? Because, why does the public visibility of fishing vessels matter?
Yeah, that's it was a surprising statistic when we did the study. We're an international nonprofit, and our mission is to bring transparency to human activity at sea. Mostly, that's been about fishing, so making fishing activity more transparent, so that you can conduct better management, better enforcement, and so that NGOs and other entities which are trying to lead countries to engage in more sustainable fishing have all the data they need to make the arguments. So when we started out, we started collecting all of this tracking data from GPS transponders that vessels use to avoid collisions with each other. This system is called AIS, for Automatic Identification System. So these vessels are broadcasting their locations to each other. Those broadcasts also go out to antennas on shore and satellites in space. And so we collect that globally. We try to collect all of it from every vessel in the world every minute of the day. And that produces a lot of data. The 75% figure is a combination of that, so that those GPS tracking devices on boats are not mandatory in many places. They're not used. They can be turned off. So there are a lot of other boats out there in the world. So we use satellite-based radar and satellite-based optical imagery to try to see all the boats that are present. And then we can match up the ones that are broadcasting the location. So those are the trackable ones, the publicly trackable vessels. And then we can identify, we can count and we can detect the size of the vessel, and we can estimate what kind of vessel it is for all the other ones we can see. And so we did this big study globally where we used Sentinel and 2 imagery from European Space Agency to image the whole world, well, the coastal part of the world, for 5 years. And we detected all the boats we could see, and then we subtracted out all the vessels that we could track and knew who they were. And we found that for fishing vessels, 75% of them were not publicly trackable in any meaningful way. So that and that reveals that there's still a lot of missing transparency. So you can't manage the vessels that you don't know who they are and where they are and what they're doing. So if you create a marine protected area and you say that it's off limits to fishing, that's only going to apply to the 25% that you can track. It's not going to apply to the other 75%. So this transparency that we're trying to accomplish then leads to, better governance for reducing illegal fishing, reducing unsustainable fishing, and also there's a government oversight function that's conducted often by nonprofits that have the information they need to, look over the shoulder of governments to try to produce better results. And I have a nice, little example of a story about a specific vessel that we tracked this way. There was in Mexico, it's the Rabia Gigedo Marine Protected Area. My pronunciation is terrible. I apologize. There was a vessel coming out of the United States called the Red Rooster 3, which was routinely going into this protected area, and it was a sport fishing vessel, and they would come in and routinely fish, go back to the United States, and they would routinely turn off their transponder, so the Mexican government would not know they were there. Well, one time they went in and they left it on, and we were able to track them. And as a result, we were able to see where they're going, and then we were able to go get satellite images that image the boat present, and we were able to produce a big data set to share with the Mexican government that ultimately enabled them to take action against this vessel and stop them from coming in. So there's, just often it's one vessel at a time that you're actually dealing with, but you have to pull that one vessel from a global data set of hundreds of thousands of vessels with billions of detections in order to make your case.
Yeah, amazing. And I think also, it is then one vessel, but of course, that's what ultimately with, making it unattractive or almost impossible to have so much illegal or unregulated fishing at sea, it is important that we have those very clear examples of this data resulting in arrests, sanctions, consequences in a shape or form that will hopefully deter this illegal fishing, as it does have such detrimental impacts on our oceans. So a few really important points you highlighted for the importance of having more of that visibility. So, in the fight against illegal fishing, or IUU, as we say, or more generally, like unsustainable fishing practice, like we have more and more marine protected areas. That's important, but we do need to also make sure that then there is actually no fishing activity if that is one of the conditions. A really important technical point you mentioned that may not be so clear for everyone is with the AIS, transponder can actually be turned off, which is maybe a really important explanation in that statistic, right? In the 75% that it's not tracked, it's either that it's not mandated, as you mentioned, but also that it can be turned off. We talk specifically about fishing, but some of the challenges with a lack of visibility of activity at sea doesn't only pertain directly to fishing. There's also a significant percentage of transport or energy activity that is not publicly tracked. A number I read there is that in that case, we're talking about maybe 25% that isn't publicly tracked. Of course, there's much more activity at sea that we can think of. We have wind farming nowadays, we have aquaculture, there's mining. So could you explain a little bit how Global Fishing Watch is working to map this kind of activity as well?
Yeah, so the 25% number surprised us a little bit. We weren't surprised to find that most of the fishing is not publicly trackable, since much of the fishing isn't even required to use a tracking device. And when they are, they, as is well known, they turn it off. But generally, the vessels involved in all the other activities at sea should be using AIS, right? And should be avoiding collisions. But, so there's fishing, there's aquaculture, shipping, oil and gas development, the pollution that results from things like oil and gas development, oil spills, mining. Undersea cables are interesting. And then now offshore wind. All of those, except maybe fishing, are increasing. Right? Fishing has been, long the dominant industrial use of the ocean, and that's been steady for many years. All the rest of those uses are increasing, and they're competing for the same piece of ocean with fishing and with each other. So they all overlap spatially. So we look at Brazil. Brazil has, extensive fishing, including small-scale artisanal fishing as well as industrial fishing. They have long-standing oil and gas operations, which generally don't conflict too much with the fishing. But now they're looking at offshore wind development, and they're trying to site lease blocks, and those overlap directly with the fishing grounds, including the small artisanal fishing grounds. So they have to figure out, if we're going to develop offshore wind, how do we close the fishing grounds without doing damage to the fishery? So it gets very complicated to manage. So we use the same tools that we use for fishing for this other activity. In fact, the reason we do the other activity is because in order to find the vessels that are turning off their transponders, we have to use all of the technology, the satellite radar called synthetic aperture radar. So it's a satellite beaming radar down at the surface. The radar signal bounces back up to the satellite. Big things made out of metal on the water reflect a lot of radar, and you see them. It's also actually turns out to be really good for seeing things like oil slicks. They show up as like a dark spot where no radar bounces back. And then optical images, so pictures of pictures of boats from space. And you take all that, you take many layers of that. So we use multiple different satellite constellations that overlap in time and space. We combine that with AIS, and then there's another GPS tracking technology, VMS, vessel monitoring system. This is essentially the same thing as AIS, right? It's a GPS device that and the boat's transmitting its GPS position and its course and its speed and its identity. It's just that VMS is mandated by the government, often used you have to install one of these in order to get a license to fish. And generally, they're hard to turn off, though operators still manage to disable these things. Though in theory, the government knows as soon as you turn it off, and then they should take action. They don't always, but often they do. And so you have this collection of all these technologies, and then we're doing AI machine learning to process it because it's just billions of, the satellite imagery alone is a petabyte of data for a year. So it's just way too big for any analyst to possibly look at. So we apply these AI tools to turn all of that raw data into vessels in places and times engaging in specific activities. So if we take all of that technology and we use it to try to find all of the fishing vessels that are avoiding being tracked, we also see everything else. In fact, you see all the oil platforms, you see all the shipping vessels, you see all the oil and gas stuff, you see all the wind farms because the devices detect them. And then what we were doing is taking all of those and subtracting them out to say, well, let's find the fishing. But then we realized the data set we were throwing away was actually incredibly valuable for a lot of things. And so we've started applying that now into a new platform that we're calling the open ocean platform that goes beyond fishing and lets you see all the different types of activity. We recently, in December, launched a workspace that's focused on seabed mining. And so we've isolated it's not actually mining in the high seas yet. It is the exploration activity that will enable the mining. So we're tracking all that and putting it on a map, same idea, high level of transparency, publish all the data, let the actors that are doing it see it, let the regulators who should be regulating it see it, and let the public and other NGOs perform their watchdog function because everybody has the same information. So we've done that with mining, and we've done a lot of work in climate also. So one of the things we can do with AI is estimate the emissions from vessels based on the way they move. And with the ability to detect all of the vessels which aren't trackable, you can estimate the total emissions footprint and assign that by country. Because all the models that people produce for vessel emissions only estimates emissions for the vessels you know about. Add in, because we know how much we don't know, so we can add that in.
Exactly.
And so our future vision for the open ocean platform is that each major industrial activity of the ocean will have its own view that all comes from the same underlying AI-generated, AI-assisted data sets.
Amazing. Yeah, it sounds very comprehensive, but then also because of that, you're able to be very forward-looking. It also does sound like maybe quite a expansion from where Global Fishing Watch started. And yeah, great to see that kind of moving and constantly learning from we've been doing this. It's great. But we actually, with everything we're doing, we're also able to kind of tap into this and provide more clarity here and provide transparency here. And we all know that is definitely necessary. So if you look at, in the ocean space more generally, the different industries that we have there, what challenge or maybe a particular industry do you feel really deserves more attention now? Or it's like you have 1 minute to talk to someone to convince them, pay attention to this. It's really important. What would be the one that you pick?
That's a great question. There are a lot of things that need to be done. And one that people don't often think about is beneficial ownership, which is a real interesting challenge. So ultimate beneficial ownership. So that is for all these vessels out there, so that the increasing industrialization of the ocean means that the operators that are extracting resources from the ocean are operating in places that are not where they're from. So they'll come out of one country and sail all the way across the ocean to do activity somewhere else in the high seas or in another country. And so one of the things you really want to know in order to manage that effectively is who's making money off of this. And that, it turns out, is really, really hard to do and the reason is because a a fishing vessel operator may operate they're actually fishing in one country. So they're required to have a corporation in that country, but that corporation only exists to own the boat. There's nothing in it. Then that corporation is owned by other corporations elsewhere in the world. And you may have to go through multiple steps of ownership to find out where the money goes, who controls it. And so who's responsible for the activity? If it's doing something illegal, who's ultimately responsible for that, and who benefits from that illegal activity? And so it turns out that's hard to get at because countries generally do a poor job of publishing the information that you need to get at it. And this is an unknown about ocean-based activity that I can't get at with satellites and remote sensing. Right? There's no way to fill that information gap strictly with the application of technology. Now, once they publish it, I can scrape it from all the websites and databases and combine it all and automate all that. But if it's not public and it's not published, can't do anything with it. So we work with a number of partners to promote greater availability of ultimate beneficial ownership, and this is a major initiative that we're working on. And the UK has got a great open ownership registry that is a really nice example of how it could be. The United States generally gets an F on openness because the United States doesn't publish who owns corporations. It's very easy to hide. And China does pretty well. If you're inside China, and can get access to the internal sources that are available to Chinese, you can do a fairly decent job of tracking. So it really varies by country, and it matters a lot what jurisdiction the corporation is in. So that's one of the areas that I would love to fix. So, for example, the commercial fishing industry generates $141 billion of value every year, but we can't really trace where it goes.
That's a lot of money to disappear and not knowing in whose hands. Yeah, and I think that financial transparency, sometimes I do see initiatives about financial transparency, and then I'm like, oh, that's super exciting because, we know how important that information is, follow the money, we always say. And sometimes they miss certain ocean industries. Fisheries particularly is one that I often miss there, sadly. With beneficial ownership, it's great to hear that you think this is such an important topic, because this is actually something that I focus a lot of my legal research on, is just understanding, like, okay, why is this data protected? Why is it not published? Because it's not like we're lacking any technology there, right? These are very simple databases that you would need to put this information in. It's just lack of a political push, I guess, to make this obligatory. Where I'm from in the Netherlands, it is also public information. I know this because I own the company Natural Justice, and it says UBO, and then it says my name. But I will also say, when I first got that letter 10 years ago, I was like, what does that mean? And so, yeah, I feel like that is a topic where little by little we're at least starting to talk about it a lot more. But then in the research I've done, okay, where is it actually published or really truly accessible to people? It is really a handful of jurisdictions.
We've just done a global study looking at how accessible, sort of ranking all of the jurisdictions where there are companies that own industrial fishing vessels, and ranking them based on how accessible the ultimate beneficial owner is. And so, is it known? Is it public? And, on a website, you just go look. Is it knowable? That in theory, if you know who to ask, you can find out? Or is it simply unknowable, right? It's is not to make it public. And so
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
ranking all of the jurisdictions, and hopefully that report will be published in a few months.
Amazing. Well, I'll make sure to link it in the description for anyone to have a look. And yeah, and I think it's also, we talk about public information. Sometimes we don't even have the same understanding of what does publicly accessible mean. Are you talking about it's just out there, you just have to go to the website and it's right there? Or is it, no, you need to request this information and generally you will get it. Because if that's the case, then you're getting into a whole other discussion of true accessibility in terms of language, etc. We talked a little bit, you've mentioned it a few times, with the using AI and leveraging AI, because as you mentioned, you are talking really about large data sets. I saw an article recently that you have written that said AI can save the oceans if we let it. And it talked a lot about machine learning plus the kind of an explosion we've had of satellite data, and that really helps you to map the ocean in ways that you really couldn't before. So what is it really, what's the AI element there? What is AI doing there that in the past with classic monitoring or human analysis that it was just not possible?
When we started Global Fishing Watch, we essentially made a bet that the data was going to be there. So we saw the trend of increasing Earth observing satellites being launched and the costs coming way down. And so if there's a huge amount of data available, then investing in AI to process it all really pays off. And that worked out great because now there's just more and more satellites coming online that can observe different things on the surface or even below the surface of the ocean sometimes. And so, and what AI does is it lets you essentially have an AI analyst that can look at all the imagery for you, or it can look at the billions of positions of vessels we collect every day, and turn those into behaviors rather than looking at the thousands of positions that are recorded for a vessel today. Put a track, right? Draw a track on the screen, and a person looks at it and says, "Oh, that looks okay, and that one looks suspicious." The AI processing pre-processes it for you, and then gives you, so you turn an image into vessel detections with lengths and orientations and an estimate of the type of vessel, and you turn the tracking data into this vessel is fishing with long line gear, and this is the set, and here was the haul, and here's how long that operation lasted, and here's a purse seiner doing a set, and then that lets you say how many activities happened here last month. And the AI's already done all the fundamental work for you. So now you can get, instead of digging through data, you're going directly to asking for insights. And then we can associate all that long time series of activity with a vessel. And so now you can aggregate that into insights about the vessel's activity, right? Which vessels are acting the most suspiciously, which vessels turn their AS off not periodically, which vessels, look like they're fishing in areas where they shouldn't be. So
Mhm.
that's so AI gives you the scale really to look at everything. And now I should differentiate here. So when we talk about AI, everybody's talking about AI today. Everybody's
Mhm.
saying we're using AI, right? Every software service you use now, you click and it says, "Hey, we've got these new AI tools."
AI generated.
That's right. A lot of that is the new generative AI. So that's, ChatGPT. You type in something and it generates a bunch of text and it amazes you with how much it appears to know, even though it turns out they don't really know. They're just
People
guessing. And
pleasing.
sometimes they're wildly, crazily wrong, right? So, so that's not what we use to produce any of our outputs. Everything that we use is really more machine learning. So we're training a machine learning model how to detect a boat in from satellite radar image. So you've got this image. We train it by identifying, tens of thousands of examples of what a boat looks like, and tens of thousands of examples of things that aren't boats. And then we run the model, and it predicts. And then we give it an error bar, and we say it's 95% accurate at detecting boats, which means 1 in 20 it gets is wrong. Right? And we carry all those caveats through when we publish the data, so that remind everybody that this isn't always right. It's right most of the time, but it can be wrong, and that's different than the generative stuff. Though we do use LLMs just like everybody else in our work, and we're finding that it's really accelerating our work because you can use these LLMs to help you write reports. They're very useful for coding. You can have it. The models can find bugs that your own coders missed, can write, and it lets you rapidly prototype code that you're not going to use for real, but you're just trying things out. It lets you do that really fast. So we're finding a lot of acceleration. But so one of the things that we've done that is maybe a little unusual for a lot of NGOs, we're kind of unusual anyway, because we're a full on, NGO transparency, open data is good, better management. But we're also really a pretty serious technology shop. right? We have 20 data scientists, and we have a dozen software engineers. And so it's a big shop. And so one of the things that we've done is created a data ethics program built into our software development and project management framework because we've always been concerned that if we automate everything and we apply AI to everything, and right, humans are only looking at a few percent of the output and really evaluate whether it's right or not. We could get it wrong in ways, and we know we're always getting some things wrong, but we could get it wrong in ways that really matter, and that, where the unintended bias that it goes into the models because of the way that we build them or the training data we feed them or whatever, that produces some bias, which is really harmful. And so we've developed we have a group, an in-house group we call the Data Ethics Squad, and their job is to get together and look at where and do what we call a consequence scanning process. We partnered with a company in the UK called the Open Data Institute to help us develop this process. And now it's running pretty well. So, we do it's kind of lightweight touch. Most things we don't need to look at. The things that do need looking at, especially things like that affect small scale fisheries where a boat equals a person, right, are a lot more sensitive in terms of, what you publish and how careful you are about getting things right. We're talking about how we're applying data ethics to the process of applying AI at scale and publishing the output to everybody in the world for free.
Yeah, I think that's such an important discussion, and really appreciate you highlighting that the ethical side of data, and especially with some bias that may be in some of these systems that are really processing all of that data. And if there's not a sufficient insurance of a certain quality or truthfulness, publishing data can also have negative impact. So it's really great to hear that you have actually a dedicated squad to consider this element of the work as well. And I think that's an important thing to remember when we are talking about data transparency. So, yeah, I think an important distinction you made is when we're talking about maybe more like consumer AI, so the LLMs like ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity, as well as machine learning, which is a much broader term, really supporting and helping you to scale all of the work that you do, which sounds necessary because it definitely is a lot. The fishing industry is a huge industry, and then now with the platform focusing on several other industries as well. So is there any success stories, maybe specifically in the context of AI, that you would like to share?
Yeah, sure. Well, so I'm very happy that we're now reporting there that we are contributing to almost 3.5 million square kilometers of protected areas in terms of designation of those protected areas, and as well as monitoring and management of those protected areas. And by that I mean our data is used and is an essential part of those operations. And so those are large marine protected areas, coastal EZs, exclusive economic zones, that are being actively managed using our data, our marine manager tools and our vessel viewer tool as inputs. And so that's a nice, big, and AI makes that possible by giving us the scale and the ability. It's the key to being able to give that stuff to the end users and the country partners at no cost. And the only way we can do that is by being able to do things fully automated and efficiently, so we don't need a whole army of analysts in the loop to look at everything. And so one other really nice story that I'd like to share with you. So we recently we were working with a partner called Data Desk, and they're a sort of an energy development watchdog nonprofit, and so they were looking at Mozambique. Mozambique has got Total Energy is building a liquefied natural gas infrastructure there, but a bunch of the work's offshore, and the whole area is right in the middle of where the fishing is. And in Mozambique, right, a lot of this is artisanal fishing, right? This isn't industrial fishing for export. This is fish that is consumed by the coastal communities, and it's a crucial source of protein for the people that live there. And so the project was put on hold by the government, and Total Energy said they were, putting it on hold. But then the reports that the dredging activity was continuing. And again, because it's offshore, right, it wasn't really easy to see. And so Data Desk came to us, and then we pulled up a bunch of data to show that the dredging vessels really were active and that they were actually dredging, because we could use the satellite imagery to see the sediment plumes. So it's not just that they were driving the boats around, they were clearly
Mhm.
dredging. when they weren't supposed to in in these areas that affect the fisheries and in a way that the government couldn't actually monitor it or take into account the impact on the fisheries. So that was a nice piece that, being able to illuminate that kind of thing makes us feel good. And then another story is have a long partnership with BirdLife International. About 150,000 seabirds every year are killed as bycatch by longliners, right? The seabirds come down and go for the baited hooks, and then
Mm-hmm.
they get hooked.
Yeah.
And the remedy for that is well known and fairly simple: set your hooks at night, and then you pull your catch out during the day. So most of the operators that are operating in the regional fisheries management bodies that require this say they're doing it. But if we take all the data that shows and we track when they're doing the set and when they're doing the haul, and the AI machine learning lets us figure that out, we found that only 15% of them were actually doing it. And so
Wow.
we worked with BirdLife to publish a big report, basically
Yeah.
shaming the industry into not
Yeah.
doing the one simple thing that they knew could work. And so, since then, we've seen rising levels of compliance. So that's also
Amazing.
a nice thing to be able to do, to publish something like that that makes a difference.
Yeah, and that is a shockingly low number of those actually complying with that RFMO requirement, and especially if I feel like there's sufficient challenges we have with at-sea industries that are really hard to solve, and if this apparently is one that's, there is quite a simple thing you can do to avoid it. It's great to see how the analysis that you're doing is really helping to just increase the numbers of compliance there. So, what I really like about talking about technology and AI, particularly in the ocean space, is that it's generally quite positive messaging. Everyone does emphasize that it's important. We're not talking about using AI to eliminate all people. We still need to work with people. We still need to have human analysts, but the combination of that is really where the strength is. And because very often when more in my day-to-day life, when we're talking about AI, it is a little bit scary. It's gonna, have a lot of big impacts on people's lives. And so I like to also sometimes highlight the positive elements, and also like that, it's generally your messaging and Global Fishing Watch's messaging on AI does seem to be, representing quite a nuanced view. So, highlighting the positives, but not ignoring that there are maybe certain risks, or not acknowledging that people have certain fears in this context. Is there any particular risk using AI in this ocean space?
There are a lot of challenges for us in the future with the emergence of AI. It's evolving very quickly. It's way out ahead of society's ability to understand how to use it. And the better it seems, the more likely people are to trust the AI generated outputs. And it's why we're very careful. We've been very careful with generative AI. There are many NGOs. We've had partners that have been lobbying us to work on projects with them where we're going to put generative AI between our data and the people using it. And we're not ready to do that yet. There's a lot of power there, but there's also a lot of risk. But that is something that I worry about, that people
Mm-hmm.
will adopt, particularly generative AI, too fast. That if the when the AI is 80% right, you're going to end up carrying this 20% error. People are going to say, "Oh, good enough," and then go ahead with it. And then and you stop reading things closely and you stop seeing where the problems are. And then you carry all that forward. And there's a lot of opportunity for really bad decision making that results from that. So we're a little worried about the rush to do that, but also heartened to see that it seems to have peaked. So in the coding world, there was a survey of coders that showed that it very rapidly peaked at 30% of coders were using it to write their code. But last fall, it peaked and it started going down. So people are realizing that it's not really great for everything. And so hopefully that will happen across the board, and the usage will settle down to as people begin to understand what it's good for and what it's not good for.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's very important element, and it's I've seen it just personally be very helpful with maybe proofreading, like slightly simpler tasks where I can make it very clear what I want. But sometimes I test it for any legal work, and it's really, really, really terrible. And I assume that's going to apply to anything that really requires a more complex nuanced type of analytics. Sometimes even just, pull up Article 5 from this law, and I know exactly what it says, and it just pulls up a random, completely different article. So, it's really simple mistakes sometimes still that we do see with these systems. So I think, awareness is really the key word there. So before wrapping up our conversation, I would like to ask you about everything we talked about. Where do you think we will be 5 years from now with all of this work that Global Fishing Watch is doing?
Great question. So we will have launched the Open Ocean platform. We will have something to say about every major industrial activity in the ocean, and in particular, how they all intersect with fishing, because they all will. And we will be increasingly moving more countries to more sustainable practices and more effective management by bringing more and more data. So that, the transparency is just going up and up. And that's a great trend. More vessels are using AIS, right? It's becoming mandated. More countries are enforcing the mandates. Vessels are using them and complying. And that creates a virtuous cycle of better management. The more data you get to manage things, the more effectively you can manage it. You start making management rules that assume that you have the information to make decisions. And so we're really excited that a virtuous cycle of effective management and enforcement, right? By sharing data across countries, you get better port-based enforcement. So, vessels that are doing things illegally in one country, if they come into a port in another country, you can enforce those rules. So that whole system is steadily improving, and so we're optimistic that we will get the oceans, by 2030. Well, of course, there's a goal to protect 30% of the oceans by 2030. I hope we get close to that.
Mm-hmm.
But we also will be in a much better position to manage all of the activities, so we can see whether the protections are actually working or whether they just exist on paper.
Well, that all sounds very promising. So I love that. That does bring us to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for the work that you do and setting up Global Fishing Watch. As I think we all know, it does really fulfill an important role in ocean transparency. And thank you for talking here with me today. And as we highlighted, it is just an important topic because, the ocean is very important to humanity, to the planet, especially in these challenging times. So it is great to learn more about how we're working to increase that transparency.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.